My father's first love returned to the country, and in an attempt to rekindle their romance, he left my mother, who was in the hospital after a serious accident while delivering takeout. I begged him to come back, but he only cursed me, telling me I was hindering his important plans. I spent the night outside the operating room, crying and praying, but despite my efforts, my mother didn't survive. Once she passed, my father immediately married his long-lost love. I refused to accept her as my stepmother and skipped their wedding. This caused her to resent me, and from then on, she treated me terribly while my father ignored it, calling me a liar. It wasn't until I uncovered that she was having an affair with a married man that I realized my father was completely under her spell. Just when I was about to reveal the truth, she poisoned me at the dinner table. When I woke up, I found myself back on the day of their wedding. This time, I decided to attend. It was the first time I saw my father so happy. He was deeply in love with his first love, and in the end, I realized he had simply become a backup. I quietly sat among the guests, observing the wedding. My father, so eager to prove his love for Sophia, had spent half of his fortune on this lavish celebration. But it had only been a month since my mother's death. I clenched my teeth, bitterness overwhelming me. "Thank you all for coming," my father began, his face full of joy. "Sophia and I have been through so much, and we've finally found happiness together. All the struggles before are just a memory. You are the only one I will ever love, Sophia." A flush of red appeared on his cheeks as he looked lovingly at Sophia, who smiled sweetly at him. The room erupted in applause, and the old man kissed her passionately. It seemed like they were finally living their happily ever after. But had they really suffered? It was my mother who had supported him through school, working tirelessly as a delivery driver, only to die while still supporting him. And yet, he had moved on so quickly, abandoning the woman who had given everything for him. I felt disgusted and wanted to confront them, but I knew it wasn't the right moment. I had a plan, and today, I would make them pay. Quietly, I excused myself and left the banquet, heading toward the broadcasting room. I couldn't let them get away with this. I connected to the sound system and sent a message through the system, making sure everyone could hear. Suddenly, a sharp noise rang out from the speakers, causing the guests to look around, confused. My father, startled, turned to the staff for an explanation. I cleared my throat and began. In my previous life, Uncle David and I had uncovered Sophia's affair in full. It's unfortunate I died before I could expose it. But now I'm here to reveal the truth. The room grew quiet as I continued. "Hello, everyone. I'm Emily, Ethan's daughter. My father betrayed everyone who trusted him. When my mother worked so hard to support him through school, he fell in love with his junior, Sophia. After he began working for a prestigious company, he didn't give her a single penny of his salary, forcing her to keep working as a delivery person. Not long ago, my mother was killed by a large truck while on the job. On that same day, Sophia called my father, and he left my mother, abandoning her to meet her in secret. Now, just a month after her death, he is marrying her. But what he doesn't know is that Sophia is 3 months pregnant, with the child of a married man, and we all know who the father really is." I paused, steadying myself as I faced the crowd. Since that man won't marry her, she's only turned to my father to cover her shame. What a pathetic situation. The guests whispered in shock. My father's face turned pale, and he tried to shout at me, claiming I was lying. He ordered the staff to cut the sound, but by now, I was in control of the system. "It's time for them to lose their dignity," I said under my breath. I spoke louder into the microphone. "Dad, did you really think she ever loved you? You're just a fool, wearing the green hat and making a fool of yourself. You deserve this. You're the one who killed my mother. She loved you so much, and you didn't even appreciate her." I could feel my heart racing as I kept speaking, knowing I was running out of time. The staff were trying to break down the door behind me, and I could hear them getting closer. But I held firm, not caring anymore. The truth must be known. These two scumbags don't deserve such a sacred ceremony as marriage. Just as the door slammed open and staff rushed in to drag me away, I shouted one last time, "Ethan, is this how you want to deal with me? Beating me to death? My mother's already gone. I have nothing left to lose. But I believe in justice, and the people here will surely not allow you to get away with this." The staff hesitated, and I could see the guests whispering among themselves. I had made my point. I knew that by revealing everything, I had finally made them pay for their cruelty. Miss Emily, please. The wedding had become a complete joke. No one could look each other in the eye, and the guests were left unable to offer any congratulations. Some of them secretly recorded the events and uploaded the footage online, making it go viral. However, none of the people present were aware of it at that moment. After the staff instructed everyone to leave, the three main people involved were gathered in the meeting room at the back. Sophia was sitting on the sofa, wiping her tears non-stop. Her father sat in the middle of the room, staring at me with cold eyes. I had caused him so much embarrassment that he likely wouldn't be able to hold his head up around his colleagues anymore. He might even be fired due to his questionable actions. I gave him a smug smile, enjoying the sight of his fury. Dad, after all your hard work, you're just a fool. I've done you a big favor. Don't forget to thank me. Father jumped to his feet, his face turning a deep red with rage. Without warning, he slapped me across the face. I was caught off guard, and my lip began to bleed. You're spreading rumors about Aunt Sophia in public. You're as wicked as your mother. Vicious stepmother, I scoffed, breaking free from his grasp. Why are you so disgusting, Dad? Are you so old you didn't even bother listening carefully to what I said? No wonder those who get involved with younger people lose all sense of decency. Should I call you simple or just plain foolish? I'm not the one who's always lying. Father clenched his fists, his anger boiling over. How dare you speak to me like that, you little brat? I should have killed you at birth. His words only fueled my resolve. As he raised his hand to strike me again, I swiftly dodged his attack and grabbed his wrist, before slapping him hard across the face. Don't lecture me, I snapped. It was my mother who gave birth to me, not you. What right do you have to say anything? Do you think I'm afraid of you? Go ahead, hit me again. I shouted loudly, effectively overpowering his imposing demeanor. He bared his teeth, attempting to twist his wrist free, but despite his strength, I managed to avoid his attempts. The standoff was tense. Father, nearing 50, was panting with exhaustion, while I remained agile and defiant. Sophia, seeing the conflict escalating, tried to intervene. Her voice soft and pleading, she said, Ethan, maybe we're just not meant to be together. I don't want to see you fighting with your daughter over this. I'll leave, it's not worth it. Her performance, meant to soften the situation, only angered me further. Without hesitation, I grabbed an apple and threw it at her face. She cried out in surprise, looking at Father with innocent eyes. The sight of her feigned vulnerability made him waver, and his pity for her was evident. I sneered at her. Don't try to act virtuous. You think I don't know what kind of person you are? 2 years ago, you had an affair with a professor and used your connections to get a diploma. When his wife found out and beat you up, you didn't stop, still throwing yourself at him. Recently, when you failed to force him into marrying you, you were kicked out. Now your reputation is ruined, and you can't stay abroad anymore, so you run to my father to cover for you. Father's face turned pale, but I didn't stop. This is the woman you love so deeply? You'd abandon everything for her, but she's only using you. Once she's back with the professor, she'll drop you just like she did my mother. Father opened his mouth but couldn't find the words. He glanced at Sophia, who was now visibly distressed. Sophia, ever the skilled manipulator, quickly regrouped. She shook her head, saying, Emily, I don't know what I did to offend you, but spreading lies about me is wrong. Ethan, we've been together for years. Do you really believe her over me? As she spoke, she even managed to shed a tear, turning her face away in an act of sorrow. I saw Father hesitate, and I mocked him. Stop pretending. Ethan. How old are you now? She's younger, more beautiful, and takes better care of herself. You really think she doesn't care about looks and only loves you? If that was true, she would have married you by now. No, she's with you now because you're old and fading. Do you still think you have charm? My words pierced him like a dagger, and this time, Father didn't scold me. He was clearly shaken. Although he was deeply in love with Sophia, my words struck at truths he hadn't wanted to face. At nearly 50, he had lost his youthful looks and charm. He couldn't compete with someone younger and more attractive, and he knew it. Father coughed, looking at Sophia's pale face, and she acted as though she was about to collapse. We've had such a deep connection for so many years, Ethan. Do you really believe her instead of me? She asked, her voice trembling. If you doubt me like this, maybe I should just end it all now. She rushed toward the window, causing father to panic. He couldn't bear the thought of losing her. Sophia had always been his dream, the one he had longed for. She had been his weakness, but now, it seemed she was also the blade that would pierce his heart. Seizing the opportunity, I didn't hold back. True love conquers all, I mocked, making sure my words landed hard. Sophia had already convinced my father that he was young again, all for her sake. But all he had done was raise another son of an old man. I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. Despite his infatuation with her, it seemed my father was only contributing to my own misery. Sophia's fury was evident as she ground her teeth, her eyes burning with hatred. It was clear from her gaze that she wouldn't rest until one of them, either my father or herself, was gone. Yet, my father remained unaware, only offering her a comforting pat on the shoulder. His eyes unfocused and distant. He appeared lost in thought. Before the tension could escalate further, the door creaked open, and I muttered under my breath, "Uncle David is taking his time." Arriving now of all moments. Turning around, I froze. Both Sophia and I were taken aback. There, standing in the doorway, was a woman with graying hair. A stranger. My father looked at her, confused. But then, Uncle David walked in, his smile warm as ever. "Apologies, I was a bit late picking someone up from the airport," he said, brushing off the delay with a nonchalant grin. "It's no trouble at all," I replied quickly, relieved to see him. But suddenly, an odd realization hit me. How did he know to come here? I had only asked him to attend the wedding and bring me home. I hadn't told him anything about Sophia's schemes. Could it be that Uncle David was also reincarnated? I shivered at the thought. I rushed to his side, whispering, "Uncle David, were you also reincarnated?" He gave a knowing smile, saying nothing, but his arm around me felt comforting. His kindness was something my father had never shown me. My heart brightened, and I clung to him, tears welling in my eyes. For once, I wasn't facing this fight alone. But as usual, my father's ego and control issues couldn't stay in check. His expression darkened as he glared at Uncle David. "What do you think you're doing? You're supposed to be Emily's uncle, not some stranger. Show some restraint." Uncle David, unfazed, simply tightened his hug around me. "Since you remarried, I doubt you'll care for Emily properly. I've watched her grow up. I know her better than you. If you can't show her love, I will." That was the tipping point for my father. His anger flared, and he pointed at Uncle David, calling him a bad influence, accusing him of filling my mind with lies. Sophia, pretending to sob by the sidelines, watched the argument with a cruel satisfaction. She wanted nothing more than for my father and me to drift apart. She had always been calculating, scheming for her own benefit, and this was just another piece in her twisted game. But my attention shifted when I noticed the woman, Emma, the professor's wife, standing quietly behind me. Her eyes held a dangerous intensity, and I realized this was no ordinary woman. The same woman that Uncle David had invited. But why? Emma spoke sharply, her voice carrying weight. "What's all this fuss about? Isn't this familiar to you, Sophia? When my old friend passed away, her husband went straight to his lover, and the lover took her place before her body was even cold. Now this woman, Sophia, is hiding her pregnancy, hoping to use it as leverage to secure her position. You're nothing but a gold digger." Sophia paled, her hands instinctively covering her abdomen. Emma's cold gaze never wavered. "So, are you pregnant?" she sneered, moving to pinch Sophia's cheek. The force of Emma's presence was undeniable. Even my father froze, unsure whether to defend Sophia. "Trying to trap him with your lies?" Emma's words were cutting. She shoved Sophia roughly before signaling to the bodyguards. Within seconds, they rushed in and dragged Sophia away, ignoring my father's protests. Sophia's shrill screams echoed down the hall as she was taken. Emma turned to face my father, her expression cold. "You disgust me. You abandoned the woman who was by your side for so many years, and now you're so obsessed with a promiscuous woman. Look at you. Do you really think anyone cares about you, or is it just her empty promises? If you keep believing her lies, you'll be drained dry." My father's face twisted in rage. He opened his mouth to retaliate, but Emma, without hesitation, kicked him in the stomach. He stumbled back, gasping in pain, his pride shattered. "I owe you one," Emma said quietly. wiping her hands with a silk handkerchief. After instructing the security to bring over an envelope, she glanced at Uncle David. "It's all settled now." She dropped the envelope onto the floor, then turned and walked away, her heels clicking with finality. My father lay there for a while, motionless, before slowly rising. He glared at me as I reached down to pick up the envelope. "Emily, don't even think about leaving with him," he growled, his grip tightening on my ankle. "You're my daughter. Why are you siding with an outsider, trying to tear apart our family?" I shot him a look of disbelief. After Mom passed away, this place ceased to be home. He stood there, still holding my ankle, his voice pleading. "Go. Go find Sophia, she needs you." But he didn't even call her his wife anymore. His feelings for her were no longer as certain as they once were. Uncle David, with a calm gaze, simply asked me to turn around as he opened the envelope. After a few moments, his voice broke the silence. "Ethan, take a look at these pictures. The choice is yours now. Do you still want to live in this lie, or do you finally want to see Sophia for what she really is?"
Uncle David snorted with a laugh. When I turned around, Father's face was red and blue, and he seemed to have difficulty breathing. His eyes were red as he looked at the thick stack of photos, and even the hand that had been grasping my ankle unconsciously loosened. I immediately looked at Uncle David's cold face and, while Father didn't notice us, we ran out of the meeting room together. As for the luggage, I had sent it to Uncle David several days ago. Father was busy with the wedding and had no idea that I had already moved away all the items related to me and my mother. Or perhaps, at that time, with his beauty in his arms, he didn't care about us. I didn't think about it further. After all, I would have nothing to do with this old man from now on. When we arrived at Uncle David's house, he had already tidied up a room for me early. The room was decorated warmly, and there was even a photo of Mother smiling brightly when she was alive on the desk. My eyes became red, and I raised my hand to trace Mother's eyebrows and eyes. "Let it out. You'll feel better in your heart." Uncle David patted my shoulder, and I turned to look at him. "Uncle David, did you help me expose Sophia's true face in the last life?" "Yes. I went a bit crazy at your funeral. It's a pity that you didn't see that satisfying scene. Later, I often went to the graves of you and Sister Xiao. I just regretted that I didn't remember earlier in my life. Otherwise, your mother wouldn't have." I sighed. "Don't be like this, Uncle." He pursed his lips and took a deep breath. "In the last life when he was depressed and tried to commit suicide, Mother saved him. Uncle David was grateful for this kindness and often helped our mother and son. It's just that after several attempts to persuade Mother to leave Ethan failed, we had much less contact. I didn't expect that when we met again, it would be at Mother's funeral. He still cared about me so much and took the initiative to help me investigate the whole incident. However, I didn't expect that I would die suddenly because of Sophia's hatred. It must have been a big blow to him." Recalling Uncle David's haggard look at the funeral, I trembled in my heart and didn't dare to think about it anymore. To comfort him, I gently held Uncle David's hand. He was a bit surprised and smiled when he looked at me. "Fortunately, you're okay in this life. I'll take care of you from now on. Emily will never be wronged again. From now on, you'll be my only beloved daughter." His eyes became red and he raised his hand to touch my head. The next day, Uncle David and I went to the cemetery to visit Mother. It was also like telling Mother that he would raise me from now on. I watched the butterflies flying over Mother's tombstone and couldn't help crying out and softly called out, "Mom." She had come to see me. The video of the wedding scene went viral on the internet. In the comments section, people fiercely cursed the scumbag and the bitch and started to dig deeper into their affairs. When I scrolled through the video, Father's company had already issued a statement to dismiss him. Many self-made business owners even threatened to mobilize the whole industry to block them. Father was completely powerless to resist the attacks from these big shots behind the scenes. Before long, Father's address was dug out. Paint was splashed on his door and he was surrounded and beaten by several young people. In the video, he was lying on the ground in an extremely embarrassed state. Mocking voices came one after another around him. "Is this President Ethan? What is he doing lying on the ground? He's a dog, a bootlicker." Damn it. The kind of man who abandons his wife and children is the one I hate the most in my life. Those people kicked Ethan, but he didn't resist and just endured it. He was so cowardly. Suddenly, the picture shook. Father, who was lying on the ground, had his back soaked. He trembled violently and realized something. But even under such humiliation, he didn't dare to raise his head to resist and just hugged his head tightly. Before long, the mastermind behind the video was quickly detained and the video was taken down. However, because the video had spread too widely, it was cut into a funny remix video and spread again. Father's reputation as a bootlicker and a man who abandoned his faithful wife became well known throughout the country. He became a joke in the industry and now no decent company would hire him. Sophia's past was also dug out, and her identity as a gold digger was confirmed, but now no one knew where she was. Some time ago, there was a rumor that a certain internet celebrity went missing abroad and until now no one could find her. No matter how hard netizens tried to dig deeper, they couldn't find out anything. This coincided with Sophia's situation. Considering Emma's powerful overseas background, perhaps she had caught Sophia overseas. The power held tightly by the upper class made me shudder. This is beyond what ordinary people like us can imagine. But Sophia deserved it. That night, I suddenly dreamed about myself in my past life. Dad was on a business trip, leaving only Sophia, her son, and me at home. Her son, being naughty, broke the ornament that my mother had given me. I was so angry that I pushed him away. The boy burst into tears. Sophia rushed straight into the study, took down our old group photo, and burned it completely. Your mother is dead. Why are you still mourning for her? Remember, I'm your mother now. Sophia went crazy. In order to assert her sovereignty at home, she wiped out all traces of my mother. No matter how much I cried and begged on my knees, she wouldn't stop. Later, she imitated what she saw on TV shows and often pricked me with needles. The needle holes were so small that outsiders couldn't see the wounds. I was riddled with holes. I asked my father for help. But he told me to get lost and not to spoil the harmonious life of their family. That's how I lived a lonely and helpless life. Being sensitive as I was, I didn't dare to tell anyone else about it anymore. In a trance, I felt that same excruciating pain in my stomach as I did back then. Suddenly, the scene changed to the day when I died of poisoning. Honey, I'm so scared. I didn't know this mushroom was poisonous. Sophia covered her face and wept bitterly. Father ignored me, who was on the verge of death, hugged Sophia affectionately, and covered his son's eyes. Don't be afraid. Later, we'll give the same account. I'll definitely protect our family. She's just that woman's child. She's not as important as you two. How could I forget that? Father's heartlessness, my mother and I had already witnessed it long ago. Why did I still foolishly hope that he could see Sophia clearly? Obviously, I was the only outsider in this family. Nobody would care even if I died. I convulsed and vomited blood. In a daze, I heard a familiar call. Emily, Emily? Wake up. Everything is over. Don't be afraid. I'll be here for you from now on. I woke up with a start and saw the worried expression on Uncle David's face. Unable to hold back the grievance in my heart any longer, I threw myself at him. The past is like a dream. In this life, I won't be deluded by the so-called father-daughter affection anymore and will never repeat the same mistakes. As the saying goes, what you think about during the day, you will dream about at night. Uncle David said that their affairs had affected my state of mind and asked me not to dig into it any further. I nodded and stopped searching for information related to them. Life returned to its former beauty, but before long, Dad came to harass me again. Now he had lost both his wealth and status and had nothing left. After failing to reach me by making several phone calls in a row, I didn't expect that he would come directly to my school. There were many people during the school dismissal time and security guards were present, so he didn't dare to do anything. I swallowed hard and looked at his swollen face, which was so swollen that his features were barely recognizable, with vigilance. Dad no longer had the haughty look with his big belly sticking out. Instead, he hunched over and stood at the school gate. Emily, it's Dad's fault. Dad was so confused. Come back. Dad is so lonely by himself. Dad knows he's wrong. He suddenly knelt down in front of me. I immediately took a few steps back, feeling extremely irritated. The dream from the other day reminded me to see his true face clearly. Are you crazy? This is a school. He knelt there looking crazy and moved closer to me. He reached out and grabbed the corner of my clothes, refusing to let me go no matter what. Those few tears wet his face, making him look pitiful. To me, however, it was just extremely disgusting. The passers-by subconsciously turned their heads to look at us. At this moment, Father suddenly raised his arm and shouted, exposing me to the crowd. He wanted to drag me down with him. Whatever your opinion of Dad is, don't be angry about this kind of thing. Come home. My dear daughter, I'm your biological father. You can't abandon your father for a rich uncle. As a child, how can you be so snobbish? Dad is kneeling down to beg you. Don't abandon Dad. Dad is incompetent. Dad will definitely change. Come home. Don't have any more contact with that rich uncle. He's old and must be just playing with you. He hugged my calves tightly like an octopus, restraining me firmly. I felt like I was stuck in a swamp and had great difficulty even standing. My biological father actually took the lead in slandering me publicly. Even though I already knew what kind of person he was, I couldn't help but feel my eyes turn red with anger. But I really couldn't break free from the strength of an adult man hugging my legs. When I wanted to ask for help from others, I found that the onlookers all looked at me with a disgusted expression. My classmates, when they saw my pleading eyes, immediately turned their heads away as if they didn't know me and whispered to each other behind my back. And the old men and women who came to pick up their children stood up to defend my father. Little girl, you must have gone mad from studying too much. You can't abandon your father just because he has no money and no skills. Yes, you two are related by blood no matter what. How can you be so snobbish? When you grow up, you'll regret not being nicer to your father. Are you being kept by someone at such a young age? God damn it, you're so shameless. They tried to lecture me, but they had no idea what had happened behind the scenes. When I caught sight of the slightly upturned corner of Father's mouth, I felt a chill run down my spine. Only then did I realize Father's intention for coming here. Now that he has nothing left, he'd rather sacrifice his dignity than drag me down to take revenge. He's trying to ruin my reputation at school. He really lives up to being the father who once said he would strangle me to death when I was a baby. Come home, my dear daughter. Be obedient. Dad can still forgive you now. Don't be so shameless as to be someone's mistress. His expression was strange. Although he was the one kneeling in front of me, I somehow felt as if someone was pressing my head and forcing me to kowtow on the ground. The passers-by, who were always eager to watch the fun and make things worse, even surrounded me and criticized me one after another. All kinds of labels like shameless and unfilial were pinned on me. Damn it! I shouted loudly. Losing my temper worked. It immediately stopped the onlookers' non-stop chatter. Stop preaching to me. You don't know anything. This man is Ethan who went viral all over the internet the other day. Ethan killed my mother and now he's trying to ruin my reputation. Are you going to help the evildoer? I was so angry that I pointed at his face and said, look at his pig-like face. He knows who beat him like this. The onlookers were instantly silenced. Some turned their heads away, and some left with their children. However, the old men who hadn't left yet still insisted on the principle of harmony is precious, as if they wouldn't let me go until they convinced me. Is there any feud that can last overnight between family members? Things on the internet are half true and half false. You should support each other in the future. Your mother is dead. Why don't you quickly help your father manage the family well? If your mother knew you were so unfilial, she'd be pissed off by you. Hurry up and go home with your father. After hearing these words, I burst out laughing. When people are extremely angry, they can't help but laugh. Apparently, this old man hadn't even watched the video but was in a hurry to uphold justice. For a moment, a sense of powerlessness filled my whole body. Even my father noticed that these old men and women hardly watched short videos, and he could hardly hold back his laughter. He lowered his voice and mocked me in a voice that only I could hear. Emily, Dad was just as desperate back then. So don't blame me for being too harsh. You were heartless first. He said this in a gloomy tone and suddenly kowtowed hard to me. Come back, daughter. Dad is useless and can't give you good living conditions. With this kowtow, a new group of passers-by got worried again. Some people rushed to help my father up, while others stared at me viciously as if I were a criminal. A man grabbed my arm, pointed at my father, and shouted at me loudly, "You little girl, why are you so ignorant? Isn't it hard for your father? Hurry up and apologize to your father, stop doing those bad things and go home with him." I tried hard to break free, but I really couldn't get rid of his strength. Instantly, I broke down emotionally and tried even harder to pull my hand away. Go home. Go home. I don't have a home. My mother was killed by him. Don't believe his one-sided story. Ethan, you're so disgusting. You were emotionally abusive during the marriage and had an affair. Now you've come to my school to ruin my reputation. Are you trying to force me to die? Dream on. I'll live a good life. Unlike you, who has achieved nothing. I shouted at the top of my lungs, telling the noisy crowd loudly about Ethan's treachery and betrayal. It was as if I was gouging out my heart and lungs, repeatedly tearing open the almost healed wounds and showing them to outsiders again. This is what happened. Do you still want to uphold justice for this scumbag? My throat hurt badly, and my eyes were stubborn. Finally, that man let go of my hand. Sorry, miss. Shit. You, old man, how could you do something like ruining your child's reputation? But after all, your family. Family scandals should not be made public. Hurry up and go home to solve the problem. There are so many children watching. I was so fed up with these passers-by who were indifferent and always tried to downplay things. They were using the pretext of being good for me and protecting my reputation to deprive me of the right to defend myself. Were they going to gag me and beat me down to satisfy their male chauvinism? I was extremely irritated. Ethan was still grabbing my clothes, kneeling on the ground and crying. Yes. It's my fault. It's all my fault. My daughter has done nothing wrong. I just begged my daughter to come home. Enough is enough. There's no need to endure it any longer. Ethan, you're really despicable. Ethan was still grabbing my clothes, kneeling on the ground and crying. Yes. It's my fault. It's all my fault. My daughter has done nothing wrong. The unexpected kick made him roll on the ground in pain. I looked gloomily at the crowd half a meter away from me. This is our family matter. We'll handle it ourselves. Get lost. I stamped my foot hard again, almost stepping between Ethan's legs. He let out a cry of pain and pinched his thigh, with tears streaming down his face. That kick scared him so much that he lost control of his bladder. Seeing that I had gone crazy and started beating him without any scruples, he immediately stood up and fled the scene in a hurry. Dad was very clever and knew how to assess the situation. Otherwise, how could he have reached a high position back then? I watched his back for a long time, while those gossipy people were still watching from a distance. Still watching. I roared loudly, and those people immediately scattered like monkeys and didn't dare to come forward to comment anymore. However, I didn't expect that I would be isolated the next day. Even my best friend treated me as if I were invisible, as if I were something dirty. I felt bad in my heart, but seeing clearly those people who believed rumors easily would be beneficial for my future life. In the afternoon, the head teacher called me into the office. He said that some parents had reported that I had bad personal morality and was influencing other students, and asked me to transfer to another school. I was a bit speechless. I specifically went to check the surveillance. It seemed that they were really determined to force me to leave. I wasn't afraid that I would have nowhere to study. I called Uncle David to help deal with the matter. He took his time, leaning back on the sofa with his legs crossed. It seems your school is just SOSO. If Emily stays here, she might still be bullied. We'll transfer to a better school. It's not because of giving in. My plan was originally to have her transferred to a prestigious school for elite education. By the way, from this year on, the funding from Kaiyuan Group will be suspended. I'll arrange for someone to handle the handover." As soon as these words were said, the teacher, who had been smiling just a moment ago, panicked. "Are you the CEO of the group that has been funding the school's construction all along?" "Yes, it was for Emily," Uncle David sneered. The teacher immediately waved his hands anxiously. "No, no, no. I don't think our school should give up on any student just because of some parents' prejudices. Emily can't leave. Our teachers will help her get through the current public opinion storm." He wanted to persuade me to stay, but Uncle David just smiled and pulled me behind him. "No need. Emily is going to receive a lead education. Given the level of your school, I think it's better to forget it." After saying that, he took big strides and left with me, ignoring the flustered head teacher behind us. Now, the teacher had an excuse to deal with the parents, but he was probably going to lose his job. The pent-up anger I'd had for several days disappeared instantly, and I looked at Uncle David with admiration in my eyes. People tend to fawn on the powerful and bully the weak. Just let it go. We have the means, and we can change if it's not suitable. You're my precious daughter. I've said that I won't let you be wronged. My heart trembled, my eyes turned red, and I barely held back the tears that were about to fall. Yeah. After 16 years, I finally got to experience what fatherly love was like. Uncle David told me to relax, but when he got home, he made several phone calls and didn't sleep a wink all night. He was afraid that I would be harassed by Ethan again, so he spared no expense to use his public relations resources. If the video hadn't spread widely enough before, then he would intensify the efforts. Not only publishing in newspapers, but also making special features, going on the radio, and appearing on TV shows. Uncle David acted swiftly and resolutely, aiming to make everyone know about it. Not going all out before is the thing I regret the most. He deserves to be condemned by everyone. Uncle David couldn't help but curse under his breath. With that, I felt at ease and became energetic. Cooperating with Uncle David's decisive actions, I immediately published a statement in the front page of the newspaper severing ties with Ethan. Afraid that the writing wasn't good enough, I even asked someone to polish the article. Every word was written with deep emotion, making people burst into tears. All of a sudden, Ethan's treachery and moral degradation became known to everyone. Before long, the news that the school had expelled me was exposed, which triggered another wave of public opinion. People cursed the head teacher for fawning on the powerful and bullying the weak. They were worried that children would be looked down upon if they were taught by such a teacher. Combined with the previous incident of losing the investor, the head teacher had no choice but to submit his resignation to apologize. The school that had expelled me immediately issued a statement, saying that it was to protect the students and hoped that I could go back to school. However, the school's ranking, which had dropped drastically, couldn't restore its former reputation at all. I didn't even look at it and just buried myself in packing my school luggage. My former best friend, who had pretended not to know me before, just sent me a private message to apologize. I ignored it and silently deleted her. When I was turning the situation around against all odds, my father was the most anxious one. He couldn't bear to see me doing well. But now that he had a bad reputation that had spread far and wide, his old tricks wouldn't work anymore. So he had a change of heart and decided to fight me to the death. A man who has lost everything is terrifying because there's nothing left to restrain him. When Ethan suddenly appeared at the street corner with a dagger in his hand, I felt a chill run down my spine. It had only been a few days since we last met, but the hostility in his eyes could no longer be hidden. This time, he really wanted to take my life. "Emily, you're so cruel. You've been trying to drive Dad to death from the very beginning, right? Anyway, Dad has nothing left and has nothing to be afraid of. If I die, I'll take you with me. I won't lose out." He forced a smile at the corners of his mouth. Come to think of it, was Sophia sold by that crazy woman? I can't get in touch with her. How terrifying rich people are. You've become so cruel to me because you've been influenced by David, right? Men immersed in the financial world are really perverted. He's ruined my good daughter. I frowned. As soon as I heard him slandering Uncle David, I couldn't help but refute him. It's you who tried to ruin my reputation. That's why Uncle David is going after you with everything he's got. Think about it yourself. Who was in the wrong first? Stop shifting the blame onto others. I backed away while keeping an eye on his movements. Ethan's face was ugly, and he gripped the knife even tighter. He gritted his teeth, his eyes cold. You unfilial brat. I'll kill you right now and take your worthless life back. You ungrateful bitch. He raised his hand and ran towards me. I held my breath and immediately took to my heels. I didn't have any weapons in my hand, so I didn't dare to fight him to the death. But I forgot that Ethan was nearly 50 years old and overweight. After running for a short while, he was already panting heavily. My previous panic was really unnecessary. Looking at him lying on the ground, I was quite speechless. Ethan, you're really a joke. From start to finish, you've never thought that it was you who ruined everything, yet you want to blame everything on others. Before Mom married you, you were just a student who failed the exam. Later, she worked as a delivery person to support you so that you could get a high degree and change your fate, but you didn't know how to be grateful. People who truly treated you well, you didn't care about. You'd rather be a bootlicker and bring disgrace upon yourself. You deserve to be all alone. Ethan seemed as if his spine had been stabbed all of a sudden. He was so angry that he shouted, "Shut up," loudly. He was in such a hurry to curse others that he got the wind knocked out of him before he could even catch his breath properly. I stood about 10 meters away, looking at the man who showed no sign of repentance and silently dialed 911. It was his own business if he was suffering. It would be even better if he died. I still remembered that when I was convulsing and begging him at the dinner table back then, he didn't even look at me once. So, I had no obligation to call an ambulance for him. When the police came and took him away, they reprimanded me a few words and immediately called for an ambulance. As soon as I finished making the statement, Uncle David rushed over and we left the police station together. Living in pain can be even more unbearable than death. Don't think about it anymore. You have to register at school tomorrow. Get some rest. I nodded silently. Soon, we would move to a new city and would never have any connection with him again. Before long, Ethan was first reported by his colleagues for irregularities in his previous work and was sentenced to several years in prison. Later, it was found out that he had evaded taxes. Since he had no money to pay back, several more years were added to his sentence. There were also a series of cases such as sexual harassment, fraud, and picking quarrels and provoking troubles, which added more prison time to his record. He became dispirited. As soon as he was released from prison, he went back to his hometown and died by burning charcoal. Uncle David was a bit worried that I might be sad, but I was so angry that I bared my teeth. It was too easy on him. I immediately hired a car overnight and dug up his grave, scattering his ashes all over the ground. Only by reducing his ashes to dust could I ease the hatred that had accumulated in 2 lifetimes. I sat there all night. Since then, the story between me and them has come to an end. But the wonderful life belonging to me and Uncle David is still going on. Let's go and eat hot pot. It's on me. Congratulations on me still being alive.